Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, the climate guy setting the record straight about climate. In this video, I discuss the latest Arctic fake news, this time about the Northwest Passage. Here's the headline: Ship sets record for earliest crossing of Northwest Passage. The melting of sea ice makes it easier and easier. The ship which did this was a steel-hulled icebreaker with internet, GPS, satellite, communications, and all the conveniences of home. It's pretty easy to plot out a route when you're a steel-hulled icebreaker and you have satellite data which shows you the best route through. Let's go back to 1903 now. Amundsen was navigating the Northwest Passage in 1903 in a small wooden boat with no satellite, GPS, internet, modern conveniences, and very little light. Amundsen said the Northwest Passage was completely open in 1903, and he could have completed the voyage in 1 year had that been his purpose for being there. And remember, Amundsen had no help navigating through the ice. He could only see a short distance in front of him during the daytime, and at night he couldn't see in front of him at all. Now compare that to the icebreaker which just went through, which had a steel hull and knew exactly where the ice was through the entire route all the time. So what was going on in 1903 which made it possible for Amundsen to get through without any of the advantages which the icebreaker had? Well, according to NASA, 1903 was the 10th coldest year on record. And according to experts, the ice in the Arctic was super thick back then. But as the New York Times pointed out 60 years ago, the idea that Arctic sea ice used to be very thick was just fake news. The New York Times reported, although the idea that a solid ice sheet covers the central Arctic has lingered stubbornly in the popular fancy, the northern cap of ice worn by our planet is actually a thin crust, on the whole only about 7 feet thick. The New York Times reported in 1958 that the ice was 2 meters thick, and according to the Danish Meteorological Institute, that's how thick it is now. Not only that, but in 1958, the New York Times was predicting an ice-free Arctic. Within the lifetime of our children, the Arctic Ocean may open, enabling ships to sail over the North Pole. Well, the 1958 New York Times ice-free Arctic prediction didn't happen. Here we are in 2017, and the ice is just as thick as it was in 1958. But this story gets much worse. Let me explain. This is Amundsen's route, which he said was completely open in 1903 during NASA's 10th coldest year on record. Let's look specifically at this part of his route, which he would have had to have done fairly early in the summer. Now let's look at a recent satellite image from this region. This satellite image is tipped about 45 degrees from the map I just showed you, and the turquoise line is Amundsen's route through the Northwest Passage. The red in this infrared satellite image is ice. Note that on July 25th, Amundsen's route was completely blocked by ice this year. The reason I'm showing you a satellite image from July 25th is that's the last date when it wasn't cloudy in that region. And in 1903, NASA's 10th coldest year on record, Amundsen would have had to have been traversing this region around this time of year. So there's more ice now than there was in 1903. Besides the fact that the recent Northwest Passage story is fake news and that there's more ice now than there was in 1903, this also tells me that the NASA temperature record is fake. Had 1903 actually been one of the coldest years on record as NASA claims, Amundsen wouldn't have been able to get through. So did NASA actually know what the temperature was in 1903? Well, let's take a look at that. This map is from Ross McKittrick at the University of Guelph in Ontario. The black dots show all of the stations which had max-min temperature records available in the year 1900. Note that almost all of the available temperature records are in the United States, with just a handful of stations in Europe, Africa, and the only other places that had very good coverage were Japan and portions of Australia. So about 90% of the Earth's high-quality temperature records in the year 1900 were located in the United States. And what is NASA doing to United States temperatures? Well, NASA is massively cooling the past. Notice that in 1999, they showed the United States cooling since the 1930s, but in their current version, they show warming. So what NASA's done is they've cooled the past tremendously and warmed the present tremendously. They've created warming through data manipulation. It has nothing to do with carbon dioxide. It's data tampering at NASA. Let's take a look at the previous map again. Note that in the year 1900, NASA didn't really have any good temperature data from the Arctic, and just about all of their high-quality data came from the United States. And what are they doing to the United States data? They're massively cooling the past and massively warming the present. Everything about the global warming story is fake. NASA doesn't really know what historical temperatures are. They're massively manipulating the only place where they have really good temperature records. And the story about the Arctic melting is just fake news. Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science for a long time.